And this is Miss Taylor Seaver, who I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, but she's a graduate student at UTRGV. You want to say hi? Or?
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm a graduate student in Mexican American Studies at UTRGV right now. So, yeah. Thank you.
And I'm going to start off by telling you how this came about, because it's its own story. Go ahead. So we all know 2020 was the summer of COVID. You know, we joke about it, calling the spring break that never ended, because that's when everything shut down. And that summer, and it's funny, there's a historical marker. You can see how far it is from the drive. I was stuck in traffic that summer on Tower Road. I lived down that road. I mean, I live near that area. I go through there all the time. Never noticed the historical marker there. And I was stuck in traffic, and I saw, and I could only read a little because it was so far away, and it just said train crash. And so I went immediately to my computer, because I'm a history nerd, I'm like, train crash, Alamo, and that's when this story came out. I started doing a little Googling and found out that there was an exhibit at the Alamo Museum about it, but it's COVID, everything's shut down. But I managed to get a hold of the director, who gave me a private tour, and he let me in and showed me some stuff. And he was like a major guide throughout this whole process. He shared everything he had. He had collected a lot of stuff, you know, newspapers and stuff from the accident itself. And I do a lot of, like, I listen to podcasts and audiobooks. I love doing that, because if I'm cleaning, mowing the lawn, whatever, I can still, you know, I can't read a book, but I can listen. So I had just heard a podcast about a young man who was lynched in the early 1900s in Alabama, I believe. And this middle school teacher and her middle school children put together the story and turned it into a podcast that was picked up nationally. And we're in COVID. We're not going to be in class physically. We now know we're going to be on Zoom, or we use Google Meets. And I got it in my head, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could tell this story. But I had to wait till school started. I was actually excited, waiting for the first day of school to come, and I'm like, kids, I have an idea. Do you want to do it? So all the kids were for it. This is all done virtually. I just made a Google Drive that we all shared, and we threw everything in there, and we just divided the labor. You read this, you read that, you do summaries, and we slowly, that's how we, you know, put it together. Okay? Go ahead. Sorry. And it was something, it was really, the kids were really interested when they were starting to read about it and learn about it. And then once we started to get all this little information and grouping it together, we started to figure out what kind of script we're going to do, how we're going to, is it going to be one long one or short ones? We decided they would be like 15, 20 minutes, long enough for a drive, like if you're going to school, back from school. And so like we turned into a couple of episodes once we had enough information. Go ahead. And what was interesting is I was telling something on this gentleman here, is that the valley is so small. So I had the director of the Alamo Museum come on to one of our Zoom meetings to talk about the train crash with my students so they could learn. And we sent an email like when kids are not going to be in class because they're going to be, you know, in my class or whatever. And I sent the email out. They're not going to be in class at this time because the director of the Alamo Museum will be coming and talking about the train crash. Immediately, I get an email from our art teacher, Vicky Avila, who said, my mother witnessed the accident, and I'm related to the family of the truck driver. And that immediately gave us even more people to interview, and we got more information. It just shows how small the valley is, but it really helped us out. And the grandson of the truck driver is Hidalgo County Judge Richard Cortez. So we were able to interview him as well. Go ahead. So once we did everything, we wrote the scripts. It would be 4 episodes. We have a little bonus episode, which is Alex, the director of the museum, coming to talk to our class. We had to like use one mic, clean it, next kid, clean it, next kid. But our main narrator is staying right here. If you look up the podcast, you'll hear Taylor's voice there. She's the main narrator of the podcast. It was probably one of the times that we actually saw each other in person because we were all, you know, virtual. So we had to get permission, like one kid to come in, another kid to come in, and she was there most of the day, like recording her pieces. And so it became very successful. We got reached out to by a college in West Virginia where they have railroad studies that heard our podcast. They were really impressed. They wanted to learn more about our whole thing. He did a whole feature in a railroad magazine, which I didn't know there was, but there is. So we got a really good, you know, a lot of good feedback. Go ahead. And we kept getting feedback. I kept getting letters. I kept getting emails. I kept getting people wanting to talk. And I had just like written a book on the Alton Bus Crash, and I'm like, man, I have enough here to write a book. Like, this can go beyond the podcast. And so, and Taylor was just so involved in the whole project, not just narrating. She had a personal collection, which I'll let her talk about in a second. But when I got the idea to write the book, I reached out to her because at that time she was graduating high school and going to be a history major at UTRGV. And I'm like, you want to work on a book project? You'll be the only kid with a bachelor's with a book out. And so we worked together. And to begin with, before I go any further, and then I'm going to turn it to Taylor, the story that we wanted to tell, the reason I wanted to tell the story so bad is I'm the son of farm workers. And well, she's, you know, daughter of farm workers. And every day they're out there working, feeding their family, feeding the nation. We never think about them. You know, to me, growing up, they were my heroes. There's an old movie called The Magnificent Seven, the original version. If those of you who are older know what I'm talking about. There's a scene that always stuck in my head. And I was going to play it for you guys, but I need to set up the internet. But basically, it's about some gunfighters who go to save a town of farm workers because there's a bandit coming through, and they hire them. And a bunch of the kids go to one of the gunfighters, like, can we go with you? We don't like our parents. Our parents are cowards. And he grabs a kid and he spanks him. He's like, your parents aren't cowards. They work every day so hard, not knowing what's going to happen, but they want to take care of you. And he's like, I've never had that kind of bravery. And that's why I call farm workers my heroes. And because they, you know, they took care of me, they raised me. I heard all the stories and, you know, being housed in chicken coops, stuff like that. And, you know, because of them, here I am with, you know, a advanced degree teaching and writing because of them. And everyone in this nation's fed because of them. So this story it's an accident, but all these people died on their way to feed their family and to feed the nation. And that's what resonated with me. That's why I wanted to tell the story. And I'll let Taylor relay.
So when this project first started, I was in high school. So that was what, 2020, fall of 2020? Mm-hmm. I was beginning my senior year, but we were in COVID, right? So I was home most of the time. So the only times that we were able to go to school was when we were working on this project. So it was myself and some other students. So I would literally have to drive to school every, like, I don't know, Wednesday and Friday, we'd have meetups, right? And I'd have to drive and like go through security and like put a mask on and a shield and then disinfect everything. And then they have to like escort me into the classroom. Like, it was like a whole thing. And so we had to go through all of that, right, to record ourselves speaking. So I was the main narrator. Also, we put together a Google Drive or a Google Archive. So we did also that archival work. And then all of the students also did a lot of editing. So we created a script and then I narrated the main parts of the script. But again, going back to the main reason why I kind of was so involved with this is because I was taking his Mexican American Studies class at Donna High School and also his history class. So I was super involved in that, right? My mom was a farm worker. That's my grandpa and my mom. So that's my mom with a little girl, and that's my grandpa. At that time, my grandparents were still alive, so they were like totally like, yes, like you need to tell this story. So they were all for it. I would go to school every day, and then not every day, and then I would go back home and tell them about the work we were doing. They give me feedback. And one of the big connections that we made was Jose Ramon was a mayordomo, right? The troquero, the person that would lead like the group of farm workers. So was my grandpa. He had his trucks were his life, right? The field workers and his team of people, they're all like family. So that was always really ingrained in my upbringing since I was little. So to be able to go back home every day after completing these narrations and telling them my stories and what I'm learning, they were given the chance to say, hey, I did that too, or hey, I also like drove a truck and I also picked up people, and we would do all of this. So that connection formed, and unfortunately both my grandparents passed about a year after our podcast was uploaded and debuted. But throughout those next 2 years, because it took about 2.5 years to continue this research and form it into a book. So luckily, my grandparents' legacy lives forever in this book, and also the legacies of all the people that passed away in this truck crash.
So, like she said, it took a long time to put this together. We started doing research. I found out that the Interstate Commerce Commission, which would today be the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, anytime there's an accident, like a major accident, they come down and do a big investigation. Like when I wrote the book in the Alton Bus Crash, there's an NTSB report on that. And I actually was able to find the Interstate Commerce Commission report. And so we were able to see what like the government, study was. They actually only did a 2-day investigation. San Juan and Alamo did a 1-day investigation. I think we spent more time investigating this than anything. But once we started doing that, and we started posting on social media, anyone connected to the crash, can you please contact us? Can you please contact us? And slowly we were able to get more and more interviews. And then the city of Alamo does a really, the Lions Club does a commemoration every March 14th when the accident happens. So we actually advertise with the city, please, anyone in the family who wants to come and be interviewed. So the first time we did it, I asked some of my students to volunteer to come help me, because I was like, I don't know how many people are going to show up. It's either going to be a lot of people or little people. And if there's a lot of people I want to help, thankfully I brought those kids with me, because an enormous amount of different family members and witnesses came that day, and we're able to get a lot of interviews that were used for this book. Go ahead. But go ahead. So
I want to add to the previous slide, when we had that event at the Alamo Food Truck Park, which is now a food truck park, but it's also like kind of a memorial. And every year on March 14th, usually spring break, they host like a memorial event of the anniversary. We honestly, remember, this is coming out of COVID, so we didn't expect a lot of people to show up, especially a lot of the older groups that are related to the people who passed, right? It ended up being a full house. We tried to invite and tried to get into the community and ask as many people that were related to these people to come, right? We honestly weren't expecting much, because it was right after COVID shutdown. So we were like, okay, we'll get what we get. It ended up being super, super full. Like commissioners were there. Judge Cortez was there. His family was there. Multiple family members came down from other parts of Texas to attend the event. All the Mexican American Studies students from Donna High that could help were there. Lari, our colega, was there. So it was a super, super loud event. It was crazy. It was great though. But one of our main goals was getting that testimonial from everybody, because that's the crux of our research, right? We want the research to be reflecting the stories of the community. So something that we did, and it was crazy, after we presented everything, we kind of just let all the students go and ask everybody who's related to these people, like who's related, who's a descendant. And we literally sat everyone down there, and we got our phones out and we interviewed them and we asked them, and we sat there for maybe like an hour or 2 hours after the event. And it was crazy, because it's like, I don't know, like 15 students. And after that, we all had to upload our interviews, and it was just like crazy getting that material. But one of the reasons why we wanted to do that is because, unfortunately, so many of the names were not reflected correctly on the death certificates or the newspaper articles, because this was national news, right? It was everywhere. So their names weren't spelled correctly, which we didn't feel like was an accurate representation of the community. It was really sad seeing their names misspelled, considering the way they passed. So by being able, one, talk to the families and get their names, get the correct spellings and the ages that they passed, that was one big help. We also went to the cemetery in, I think it's Escobares? Mm-hmm. That's where my mom. Yeah, yeah. And there's a really funny story with that, is we walked the whole cemetery, I think in spring. It was hot. We were tired. At this point, we were really frustrated because we couldn't find accurate list of dead, right? We couldn't find the accurate death certificates either. So we walked the whole cemetery and we were discouraged. We're like, oh, we can't find the names. We can't find them. As we were walking to his car to leave, we felt something tell us, look over there.
So yeah, turn to your left. Something at the same time we both turned.
We both turned, and it was this family cemetery, the Rosa family cemetery. Yes.
We somehow missed it. We went in a circle.
It was in the middle.
And we were like, we couldn't find it. And something, we stopped and we just turned to the left and I had a little clipboard and I was writing down names and I went by each one, and anything that was 1940, March 14th or 16th or any day within that week that they might have passed in a hospital, I wrote it down, and then we went back, and then I got all the death certificates off of, I think, newspapers.com or Ancestry. I got all the newspapers, so based on the oral history and then our own like field work and then also going online, right? I cross-referenced all three, and through there we were able to create an accurate list of names. So this is a list of names that we were able to put together, and we tried our best to do an accurate spelling, and also years, right? Ages. So I don't know, do you want to read the list? Yeah, I just want to point out the youngest being 8 years old.
There was also rumors of a child,
but we could not find anything.
Dying. We couldn't find any record of that. There were some people who survived. They had injuries, and they might have died a little later. So it was really hard tracking down everyone because not everyone died that same exact day. They were taken to a hospital and they might have passed, or they might have passed a few years later from the injuries they sustained.
And I did want to point out, like, since the Rosas are here, yeah, the biggest loss of life was from the Rosa family.
Yes.
Anastasio Rosa, Benita, Claudia, Juan, Leonardo, Ruben, the biggest loss of life in that one family.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, really, it was a Rosa family, that family cemetery, that plot there, that led us to finding all the accurate names. So your family was a huge part of this research.
Yeah, and they came to an event. We did interview some of your family members, and then over a phone call, I had another interview.
I think a day before we were supposed to submit a manuscript or something.
Yes, they got a phone. We got
another phone call from a Rosa family member, and they're like, "Wait, I have more information," and so we had to get that
the main script
and immediately go edit because we had a deadline and the very next day.
It was the next day, and we got that phone call. Like we had to read it, the whole thing, but it was so important for us to preserve those stories that we stayed up all day. Like, let's get this in there.
Yeah.
But yes. This is the most accurate list that we could come up with. We actually donated a version of this in a poster for the museum in Alamo. But yeah, this actually was probably a couple months' work just to do this.
Just to get everything together.
Yeah. But it was important because we're telling the story of a community. We want to make sure we tell it accurately. Go ahead. All right, so that's the story behind the story. So what happened? March 14th, 1940. Well, let's start with the night before. There's different, and we've talked to family members, and it's in the newspaper as well, that someone broke into the truck that was going to be used that day. It was a model, international truck, Model D 301, half-ton. You'll see maybe some image of it in a second. But someone had broken into the passenger window, and it was busted out. And so in order to work that day, because it was a cool morning, they put a piece of cardboard to cover the window. And so that happened. Now, mayordomo is what Mr. Ramon was. He's like a crew chief. Basically what they do is they approach different farms, and they're the ones who negotiate how many workers do you need, and the pay, and all that. And he's the one who gets the workers. Now, a lot of people were from Starr County because that's where they lived previously. Then they moved to Donna. So what they would do is go to Starr County and gather up as many people that wanted to come work, and then they would stay in Donna with them. And then he would use that truck also like a bus to pick up all the other workers that lived in Donna and Alamo, and then get on the road. So he got on the road in the morning, and he's driving from Donna towards Alamo. So he's going west. Go ahead. And that's. He's going west and riding parallel, but behind him is a train, Gulf Coast Line's train number 113. And we're guessing that all this is put together by the different witness testimony and by the ICC and the other commissioner report. He's sitting in the truck. He has his two sons next to him. One son didn't go that day because he's really strict and he didn't cut his hair and it was too long. You stay home. And that's the reason that boy lived. So he's there with his two sons. He's making his way ahead of the train, and he makes his way to turn north on Tower Road because they're going to go work in Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. And as he makes that turn, the train hits the cab of the truck, as you can see right here.
Yeah.
Now, there are different testimonies whether the train was blowing its whistle or not blowing its whistle.
If it was late.
If it was late, it was speeding. Yeah, the guy who reached out to us about the professor of railroad studies, we interviewed him, and he explained a lot. Like he's like, I read your story. He's like, I bet you they might have been running late, and then therefore they're probably increasing their speed, or they could have been asleep. He says that happened all the time. It happened so much that they would have small explosives on the way into major cities to wake them up. So they would be riding the train, and the explosions would go, and they would wake up.
My papa said that the man is driving,
Mm-hmm.
said, nobody's coming? No. So they got in. Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can put like all kinds of factors. Maybe you would know, like the cardboard, the wind. If the train did blow its whistle, it's behind him. I doubt he would have done it on purpose, but a lot of people do try to beat the train.
And
we do know that.
also, I mean, the truck was filled with a lot of workers.
Yeah, there's
a lot
over
of
40
families,
workers.
Little kids, mothers, teenagers. Everyone was talking. It was early in the morning. People were getting ready to go to work, right? Everyone was barely waking up. It was very early in the morning, and it was a chilly, dewy morning. So imagine that, right? When you're driving to work in the morning, you're kind of off a little bit. You're kind of tired, right? So imagine that, all those factors put together, nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Yeah.
You had a question, ma'am?
Yes. Did this happen during the week or the weekend?
It was during the week. I think it was a Tuesday, I believe.
Tuesday?
Mm-hmm. It was a passenger train, but it also had cargo. But yeah, it smashed into the truck, and like right where him and his sons were sitting. Go ahead. You want to take this, or you want me?
Go ahead and start.
Okay, that's okay. Some people there was a tarpaulin in the back to cover the back, a bed of the truck, so that it was cold, like I said. But some people that were sitting back there were looking out and did see the train coming. And right before the impact, some did jump off. But the accident, the impact caused an immediate explosion, and it then dragged the truck 700 yards because trains don't stop on a dime. And it was an impact, and guessing around 45 miles per hour is what they were guessing at the time. That's what the report says. So it hit the truck and dragged it 700 yards and spilling bodies and all in every direction on both sides of the tracks. There's a secretary at the Alamo Citrus Association. Today it's a bodega. Like, that building is still there. And she usually watches the train because they usually will stop there to unload. And she's the one who first heard the impact and called every ambulance in nearby. But there's no 911 back then, so you just literally had to start calling people.
From her testimony, she was a secretary. Her office faced the tracks. So every morning she saw a train pass by. That was regular for her. And she also included that every morning she would hear the whistle. She didn't hear the whistle that morning. She didn't know why. So she looked up. The only time she would look up was when she would hear the whistle. She didn't hear it that morning. So the time that she did look up is when the collision actually happened. That's what kind of like brought her to attention.
Yeah, yes, sir.
What time was that? What time was that?
I want to say, off the top of my head, it was like 7 or 8 in the morning. I want to say numbers don't stick in my head.
Early in
it
the
was
morning.
early in the morning.
She was just starting work that day. Everyone was barely just starting work that day, yeah.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
Do you know if the train was running all night long from its destination?
No, you start in the morning. We actually, well, not in the images here. We have actually a timetable of its stops and when it was going through. That's how we could guess it was running a little late. Because at the time of the accident, I don't have it off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Numbers just don't stick in my head. But at the time, we were like, hey, the accident happened. They were already supposed to have been at the station. So they may have been speeding.
They were coming, I believe, from Harlingen?
Yeah, it started from Harlingen and worked their way that way.
Yeah, started early in the morning.
Taking people through the valley, and also like packages and stuff like that. It was also had a mail coach.
Have you identified the woman in the picture?
We think it's her. We think that's
Miss Mary Ann Wall, secretary.
I think it's secretary, that's what I
Go ahead. Yeah, Brad Smith did a very interesting life when we did a lot of research on him. He was probably the earliest person that responded was Father Eligen, who is the Catholic priest in the church that's just down the road from that area, who heard, many people came, and we interviewed other people that came, immediately they heard. So he got there, and he's seeing some of his parishioners laying on the ground. And then within a minutes, Brad Smith, he was the head of KRGV radio, TV back then. And he races over there. And he actually snaps a photograph of the priest giving the last rites that wins a national press award. He was actually also involved in another train crash in Baylor. He was a student at Baylor. He was supposed to be he was running behind the bus with the Baylor team, and he missed it. And that bus with the Baylor team, there's a whole statue to them, to the ones that died. They also died in a train crash.
I'd also like to add, he would take a lot of photos of the valley. I volunteered at a museum a while back, and there were some very infamous photos of like the mid valley. And I looked behind to see who had taken the photo, and it was him. So he was a pretty popular photographer and journalist down here.
Now, immediately after, to begin with, you saw like there's young kids there. Because normally they would work together, more hands, more help, more sacks, more money. Those of you who've done farm working know how that works. So and sometimes they just didn't have someone to take care of them, so they usually had the kids. So it was, but some would stay behind, and what ends up happening is, we have a lot of orphans. We have a lot of people that lose their breadwinners. The superintendent in Stark County schools actually closed the schools because the teachers had to take care of the kids because they didn't know where else to go. And they were like buying clothes for the kids and stuff till they figured out what to do with them because their parents weren't coming home. But probably the hardest and saddest stories come from, you want to go?
Yeah, so in one of our interviews that we conducted with someone from the Alamo community, I believe it was her father who helped pick up body pieces. And she said that even weeks after the crash, not all body parts were recovered immediately. So it was really difficult to identify people, and that also leads into why it was so difficult to have an accurate list of dead and also an accurate list of names. It was a very traumatic death.
And one of the things that I found sad and ironic was they were sent to pick up the body parts in costales, the very sacks that they would use to pick fruit and put in. And we interviewed a couple of people who there were city workers and other people that were paid to go and try to clean it up. There was a large memorial of 3,000 people. Even back then, they were talking about trying to put up a marker. It doesn't get put up to like 2,000. Go ahead. So there's like a one-day investigation by Judge Slaughter out of San Juan and a two-day investigation by the ICC. There were some complaints like maybe you should do a little bit more digging, but both said that the blame was on the driver. They faulted the driver for it. And like I said, there's different witnesses. Marianne says she didn't hear the whistle, and that's why she wasn't looking when it happened. One driver says they did, another driver said they didn't. One of those things we'll never know exactly what happened.
There was also multiple testimonies within survivors that left off the truck. They were asked, "Did you hear it?" And they said, "No," but also you have to take into account it was loud, they were getting ready for work, they were preparing for hard labor, and also that trauma response. After you go through a traumatic event, can you really remember if you heard something as what we deem insignificant on our daily basis, the whistle of a train? But unfortunately, that was kind of the make or break in the investigation.
There were several lawyers who tried to sue for the families, and at the end, it was over $600,000 they tried to sue for. In the end, they were awarded $14,000 to share amongst themselves. And that was to be included to take care of their funeral and medical bills. It wasn't like they didn't cover the funeral and medical bills. That was like the money to do all that.
and also take care of all the children that were left at home, and they weren't in the crash, so they were orphans. So money for them, basically insignificant. They had no money afterwards.
Yeah, the Red Cross tried to organize a like a campaign to give them money per month for a little while, and they were able to do that for a little while, but you know, that's basically what came out of it. Go ahead. Now, there are many different stories as what happens afterwards. We have, you know, like you have people lost their breadwinners, people that like, in a sense, orphans, and, you know, being taken in by different family members or by different families. And, you know, there was definitely a lot of struggle, because if the parents are gone, those are the breadwinners. Who's going to bring money in, you know? And so some ended up, after a lot of struggle, doing very well. Like, you know, like Hidalgo County Judge Cortez and his cousins and uncle and brothers and, you know, our judges, and, you know, they did well, but others' families struggled. And I've talked to people from the Rowan family, they talked about the struggles afterwards, you know, trying to keep things going, and still, you know, didn't quite end up like this, you know, different outcomes for different people.
And even at that, so my grandmother grew up in Westico, and she actually went to school with Judge Cortez. And when we spoke to him and his cousin Israel Ramon, right? They both had to live in the same house after the crash. So it's like two sides of the family basically combined into a very small house, and the older siblings had to take care of everybody. And that was the case for multiple families. There was one person we spoke to that said, I'm not sure if it was her aunt or her uncle, but one of the older siblings had to drop out of school, and basically had to become like a surrogate mother for all of her sisters and siblings.
Oh, I thought you had a question. Okay, go ahead. Now, like we said, the city of Alamo does have every March 14th through the Lions Club, they organize a memorial. Though we found like 2 episodes of Rick Diaz Con Mi Gente. I don't know if you ever, those of you who are older know who I'm talking about. He interviewed me for the Alton Bus Crash, and I interviewed him for this. He is the one who told us about this, where to go in the cemetery. I told him, like, dude, you need to sit down and write your memoirs, because you collected so many stories over the years. You could tell the whole history of the valley. But he had 2 episodes of Con Mi Gente. And we're using, you know, the book that this is, you know, this book on this will come out in February, as our publisher told us. March will be the next big anniversary. We're going to coordinate with the city to have a big signing and to have a bigger memorial. I'll probably start talking to him like when we get our winter break. I'll coordinate with the city and with the Alamo Museum and stuff. Yes?
That's the title of your book?
The Deadly Alamo Train Crash.
Deadly 1940 Alamo
There you
Train
go.
Crash.
I'll keep reversing it.
Okay, that's kind of long.
The Alamo Train Crash.
The Alamo Train Crash. If you look up our names, it'll pop up.
Yeah, or the Alamo Train Crash, so it's a pop up. Yeah, this is the historical marker that's there. We took this before the play. There's a food truck park there called the Landmark, and he actually now did a really good job of putting concrete here and making a cement walkway to get up there, because it was literally a hill. Me and Taylor, one time we were being interviewed for this, and we're like trying not to roll down the hill as we're standing next to this thing. But he went ahead and like, now there's a concrete slab and a concrete walkway.
It's accessible as well for wheelchairs. So,
yeah, so you want to make sure
very
you're
accessible, yeah.
And so, you know, like, I believe the job of historians isn't just to like write textbooks and stuff. I think it's, I believe it's to preserve our community's histories, and that's why I wrote the Alton Bus Crash. That's why we wrote this, is to save our community's stories and, you know, give it back to them preserved. I mentioned, I think he's a great-great-grandson of the truck driver. He is a film student, and we've been talking, he's talking about doing a documentary on this as well. So, and I would, you know, really like to thank members of the Rosa family for coming today, and the members of the Ramon family. Well, hope we do your story justice when the book comes out. But any questions or any other comments or anything?
Did the crash, did it lead to any kind of safety?
Yeah, yes, actually, there was I found a quote immediately that they were looking at, we can't transport farm workers like this anymore. Because a couple of weeks after this, there was a similar one in Harlingen, killed 15 people.
You know, like, imagine there was no, like,
Nothing.
no lights, no...
You know, yeah, there was a big old safety commission after this. Excuse me. And so changes came slowly, but even to this day, people still try to beat the train. The poor engineers who run the trains, I came across articles about them having PTSD because they can see the accident happening and there's nothing they can do about it. Like they'll see a family crossing, they'll see, you know, and they know they're going to hit them, but you know they don't stop. They can't stop like that quickly, and you know to this day it's still a problem. So after writing this, I'm always like super careful.
Yes. Those lines are there for a reason. Listen to those lines. And yeah, I mean, there's been recent cases of people that stop on the tracks, and when the barriers go down, it hits your vehicle. And not only that, you kind of get stuck. So if there's a train coming, your vehicle's completely gone. You have to get out. Yeah, so that did lead to like an instigation of, we need like implementation of those lights, warning lights, and also those barriers, and also those lines. So you do have to listen to those. They're there for a reason, and this is one of the reasons why they're there. Yeah, because the professor of train studies told us that train probably was involved in maybe 20, 30 accidents. It does nothing to the train. Like, can you go backwards? I'll tell you to where the train is. There it is. Completely intact. And I like to add a few hours after they were able just to clean up just a little bit. Remember, it took them weeks to really efficiently clean it up. But when they were able to get the wreckage out of the way, the train went on its way. It had a schedule, so they continued like nothing ever happened. Yeah, and yeah, I just, to me, I see the truck like, man, we don't build trucks like this anymore. Like, it's, even though the damage and all that, it's still kind of intact. But yeah, the train, not a scratch on it.
You said they are not transporting in the trucks anymore. So how are they doing? Buses?
Or just larger SUVs or trucks. But now it's like a caravan. Yeah. Usually and you've seen them, like you'll see a whole bunch of cars along the side of the road, like almost like a caravan where people are picking the crops. Although I'd still like to add, this was in 1940. My grandfather was a mayordomo in the 70s, 60s, 80s, 90s, even in the 2000s. And they still use trucks to transport people. I mean, it's the most costly, efficient way to do it. And also, everyone's so used to it. You take your truck around the neighborhood and you pick people up. My grandfather would tell me stories of, he would have people that were like 16, 17 that would go to school during the day, but in the afternoon they needed to go to work. So he would literally take his truck and pick them up from school like a bus and take them to the fields. Yeah, I will say, like, did an enormous amount of research on trains, how they work. I had no idea. Normally, you know, and all this stuff, but we didn't have to do any research on farm working. All I did was Dad. Yeah. Yeah, like, can you tell me about this? He described the same thing because he's like, the truck is used to transport people, but then you can transport supplies, you can do all kinds of stuff. He explained how you can take the boards down or turn it into a complete flatbed. He was the one who gave me all this, like, if I needed research on farm workers, I was just on the phone with my father. And, it's, you know, her with her grandparents. It's basically like a portable house. You can eat there, you can sleep there. Yeah, sometimes you start your mornings there. That's where you house your water. For a mayordomo, my grandpa would have these huge jugs of water. His truck was basically where the food, mostly tacos every day that my grandmother would prepare for everybody, and then big jugs of water, and everyone was good to go. You just go to work. Yeah, and that's how I want people to remember, like, these were workers, they were family men, they were trying to feed their families, trying, you know, just an everyday job that no one really recognizes, you know, taking care of the country and their own families. And that's like what really drove me and her to write this book.
We don't have no railroad in Rio Grande because there was too much accidents. They took them away.
Did that lead to, this is kind of like a follow-up, I guess, to the earlier question, but did that lead to any child labor reforms? Oh, no. As a labor historian, all labor laws exempt agriculture. Yeah. Now, anytime, even during the New Deal programs, exempt agriculture.
Presently? Right now? Yes.
Yes. That's why it was hard to unionize farm workers and stuff, because that was also illegal for a long time. Because all labor laws that were protecting all workers always had the agricultural exemption. Yes, sir.
Wondering, did they ever catch the guy that broke in?
Not that I ever heard
No.
of.
No.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
I live in Alamo,
Mm-hmm.
and I go by there at least
So do I.
2 or 3 times a week. Pass by there. I know the history.
Mhm.
But when you read about the distance the train traveled before it came to a stop, I'm wondering where did it come to a complete stop?
I can tell you if you know Alamo.
Yeah.
You know where the rail yard is? There. If you're on Highway 83 and you look at the rail yard, there'll be a concrete platform that used to be a station. Right around there is where it stopped. We measured it. We sat there like we Googled like you can do distance on it. And like it was right there is where it stopped. So where the rail yard is, that's where it stopped.
About Phil's, that's how far it takes.
I worked on the railroad
Oh.
for 13 years.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
I know, and I've
Reason-
seen many of people get killed.
The reason I was asking is because some maps show that it came to rest on Alamo.
No.
Okay, so that map's in a sense inaccurate.
Yeah, the ICT report has it as well. It shows you the distance, and then we mapped it as well. And right where that slab is at the rail yard, like if you're going that way toward the beginning of it, that's where it stopped.
It's also important to remember that as time progressed, roads were widened, so that also affected it a little bit more. Because when we were researching like time and maybe like the logistics of the truck moving over the the railroad, the track, we also had to take into account that the railroad has been worked on, the track has been worked on, roads have been worked on. There's more. It wasn't always like an incline decline. It might have been flat. We don't know exactly how it looked.
I'm not good at math, but we actually sat down and figured out how quickly that truck would have made a turn. And what threw us off is the road was somewhere else back then, because we were standing there going, this isn't the same distance. But then we saw an old map and the road's been widened. So that's why, the distance didn't calculate. But yeah, we actually were like, how many seconds did he have? And we actually found the formula to figure it out.
How fast the train came?
Yeah.
They're guessing around 45 miles per hour. But like I said, they may have been speeding if they were running late.
Maybe the train was.
Yeah.
And this is like, this is a standard. And those of you who don't know how to, anything about standard, you have to downshift and then upshift and upshift. So yeah, it's a little bit, yeah.
What month did this occur?
March
14th.
March 1940, spring of 1940.
Yeah.
I think the truck was also running late to work. 7 to 8, they should have been on the field
Yeah.
on 6:36.
So yeah. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Dad, do you have any questions? You got any questions?
No.
You
got anything to say?
Do you remember anything?
You remember anything Grandma told you?
I wouldn't be able to remember anything other than what my mom used to talk about and my grandfather.
Do you remember what they used to say or what they told you?
Huh?
Do you remember what they told you?
My mother was disappointed that she didn't get to go on this trip. That's all.
Well, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything you want to add or anything about your family?
No, that I'm very sad. Because my mother suffered a lot of time.
I'm sorry, man.
That view is like
West. Yeah, so it was coming from Donna, going into Alamo. So it was going west, yeah.
So that view is looking towards east.
It's going, yeah, that's looking the other way than east.
Thank you for coming, though. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, because this, like, remember, this is like super further than Tower Road, right? It dragged the truck like up until I think it's called the rail yard. So that's a considerable amount, right? So it's looking back that way.
I need my mother.
How old is she again?
Yeah, so the truck driver was in the cab of the truck and his 2 sons were with him. His older sons, one of the other sons wasn't able to go because he didn't get his hair cut. But it was that reason that he was able to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, one of your family members told me that story.
Yeah. Yep, they're immediately.
Yeah, one of your family members. That's one of the many stories we put in the book. They told us about what happened to your mother.
Everybody was uncles and aunts, and they put them to work.
Paula, that's the one. Remember, they told us the story how the man took them in, but they made her work to stay there.
To eat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think there's any chance they could put a memorial where the train stopped?
Well, the marker is where the impact happened.
Yeah.
The memorial, I mean, like to show where it stopped.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting thing. Then we talk to the city. But yeah, if you want to like learn more or get the book, whatever, like I said, probably on March 14th or around there, we'll have a big event when the book comes out in the city of Alamo at the landmark there, or the city museum. We'll probably do both halves, but we'll try and put it out in social media so everyone can find out about it and hopefully go and hear more about this and pick up the book as well. Alamo. Yeah.
It's gonna be in Alamo.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, I'll probably on March 14th. I will try to. Actually, if you want to give me your number.
Yeah,
Oh, is it? Okay.
I have like 6.5 hours.
It's usually in spring break, so
I came to find my family.
yeah, through that week, yeah. If spring break falls onto that week, then most people are off, and we'll probably have it right on that day.
353.
Well,
73, 78.
Yeah.
73, 78. Okay. 353, 73, 78. I will let you know. I'll give you a call and tell you, hey, we set everything up for this day.
Because I have to buy mine online.
Okay.
In 1940? Oh, interesting.
Okay, Thursday. Tuesday, Thursday. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because this year is going to be a Thursday as well.
Oh, wow.
2024.
Oh, wow. Like,
so,
how fortuitous, like the whole cemetery thing.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually felt, we didn't say that earlier, we actually felt like that was them telling us to tell their story. When we didn't find the graves at first and we were walking and it was just so funny. We felt it. We didn't say anything. We just both turned to the left and walked that way. And that's where everything was. I swear we thought we made a concentric circle all the way around. And we're like, man, I guess I was telling her, I think I picked the wrong cemetery. I was wrong. And we're walking to the car and I don't know, we both froze and something told us to go left. And we just felt that was them wanting us to tell the story.
Those white plugs, memorials.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to tell them they had a crash on the 40, the train.
Yeah. And can you go to the part where it shows the cemetery, the Rosa family cemetery?
That's my mom's cemetery.
Yeah. And it's still very well kept. Mm-hmm. And that's when we saw that, we were like, wow. Oh, really?
We put the name of my grandmother and my mother.
Oh. Well, thank you for doing that, because that was how we were able to see it and see the colorful flowers and everything. That's what caught our attention. We were like, oh my God.
One that put flowers.
Oh.
Harry and Jean there.
Yeah, thank you.
It's very well kept, yeah.
There are only 2 sisters here in Roma, and my sister doesn't go only me.
Yeah, well, thank you, because that helped us find it.
Yeah. Then there were some other ones nearby. Yeah, Alanis.
That's my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, we found others near there. Once we got there.
He passed away and he was buried there. And the next little piece is from my sister. She bought it next to my brother. She bought the piece for my other brother.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Or comment? Yes, sir.
What do you attribute when you mentioned about the confusion with the names? Especially getting the names wrong?
Well, I mean, one, chaos to begin with. And then maybe you had people that didn't understand Spanish and misheard. We found one list that someone was there twice. It was just spelled 2 different ways. Yeah, it was one of the, I think, when we were like trying to put it all together, it was like 34, but it wasn't 34.
Yeah.
When we started to like figure out, oh, this is just a repeated name or a misspelling of this name. And it could just the chaos, and then maybe they didn't hear right and they wrote it wrong. I mean, because they were trying to get that story was in the papers that evening. So they put it in the Associated Press and it just went out like immediately.
And it went national. So those names were replicated through newspapers all around the United States. And people didn't really understand Spanish or could read Spanish names or I know there was multiple times where it was names that were for typically like for a woman, but it was listed as a male. So we had to go back to the death certificate, see like assigned sex, and then cross-reference that.
I have a question too. Like, since your dad was your truckload or worker, did the mayordomo, did they actually keep a list of like who would get on that day?
They didn't keep a daily manifest. The only, I think, manifest that they had that could tell them who was working, like, let's say, months. So my grandma would do all the accounting for my grandpa. So that was one of the ways to keep, like, who is working within a week. But, like, the roster would change every day. Some people weren't able to go to work some weeks, or the weather was bad another week. Sometimes colonias would be flooded. So those families in that particular colonia couldn't go. So it changed a lot. It was very hard to keep it. The driver? Yes, immediately.
So he would have been the one who probably knew the most.
Yeah, and if he did have a paper, it would have burned.
Yeah.
It's really, really graphic, but yeah, they were fused to the vehicle. Yes, sir.
The reason I was kind of interested in this, I'm sure you've heard of the incident that happened in California. They wrote this very famous song about Mexican.
There's a
book that came out of it.
All They Will Call You.
Yeah.
All They Will Call You is deportees, which is really sad because they were braceros. They weren't deported. They were just going back home. And honestly, that story like really touched me. And he's doing what, like I said, all historians need to do: preserve, dig up, tell these stories. He helped those families find what happened to them because they didn't know what happened to them. They were, their bodies were just buried in a grave somewhere, and no one knew what had happened. They never came back to Mexico. Yeah, the Bracero program was during World War II into the 60s, where it was a legal thing. They would, government of the United States would go to Mexico. We need 1,000 workers. Then they would bring the 1,000 workers in. They were supposed to get paid minimum wage, decent housing, healthcare, all that stuff. And so they weren't like deported. They were like their shift was over and they were going home. But it becomes a famous song, by Arlo Guthrie and Bruce Springsteen and other people sing it. And it was All They Will Call You as Deportees. I know they were trying to like write it like, to give them honor, but they weren't, they were wrong in the term, using the term deportees.
Yes, that's it. In the Alamo Bridge, there's a lot of people, kids and everything, and the bridge there waiting for
being processed
to come in. I feel sad for all those people.
I mean, even now as a student, people come into the university every day, like the commuting, right? It's a very common thing in the Valley.
Yeah. One thing it was interesting when we were being interviewed we're interviewing the railroad expert. He's like, and so he thought they were all immigrants. I'm like, no, they lived in the Valley. They weren't immigrants. They lived in Donna. They lived in Starr County. Like just the idea that they were all immigrants. I'm like, no, they lived here. Like even like our parents and stuff would have gone to like she said, maybe go to school, but then you got to go work. In the summer for sure, you're going to go work. And then what I didn't know is that the canning plants, that if you wanted extra money, then you would work at night in the canning plants processing everything. So like the younger people, like my dad, like the younger ones would stay a couple hours more. And in fact, the accident in Harlingen that happened a couple weeks after this one, they were taking a load of people to the canning plant in Harlingen. Any other questions?
I used to work at 10 years. I used to work in Rio Grande in the fields.
Oh wow!
We will go 1 or 2 days to school and then work.
Yep.
And that's hard. Like it's and that's why I says like that's what really moved me. Like those are my heroes. That they did that. They worked hard. I saw it in their faces and for me to be able to do this, they did all that. And that's why we need to recognize them. And it's a story of an accident, but it's a story of farm workers.
Yes.
Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for coming. And like I said, we'll put a big old announcement on social media when we have the book signing and the whole event on the anniversary. We're going to start talking to the city of Alamo. They've been asking us, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? And so now that we have a date from the publisher, we'll
buy one for my kids.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
We lived in Mississippi. My daddy moved from down here to Mississippi. So my daddy got killed in Mississippi. So, and that's where we was from.
Oh. Well, thank you. And
well, half of my family was born in Rio Grande, my sisters and brothers. And then the other was, all of us was born in like Tunica and home or wherever.
But thank you guys once again for coming and sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing your dad.
Well, thank you.